Hey, what's up? It's Jim, and today I'm going to talk about movie crap. Now, this is the movie news show that I do. I am doing two this week because I want to do one just about the Oscar nominations and the other about movie news. So this is the one about movie news. I will never probably do two of these in a week. This is just kind of because I wanted to split them up and I didn't want to just do an Oscars thing. I thought it would just work better as a movie crap episode. So I hope you agree with that. But let's just get on with the news. And yes, the next video will be a review. That's still primarily what I do. The biggest news, I guess, that wasn't the Oscars was the title of episode 8, which is The Last Jedi. I'm digging the red font. Does The Last Jedi mean that Luke is going to die? Does that mean that Rey is the last Jedi? I don't entirely know what The Force Awakens means, really. Is it just talking about that one scene where Rey kind of trips out because she holds a lightsaber or something? I don't really know. I said on Twitter that also the plural of Jedi is actually Jedi, so it could mean like a group of Jedi, and also the plural of Sith is Sith, so not Siths or Jedis. You'd say Jedi like fish or something. So no one's exactly sure what the hell it means, but there's been pictures of Rian Johnson putting the title in the edit bay, so if you want to see the very beginning of The Last Jedi, I guess you can. It's a cool title. I think it's a cooler title than The Force Awakens, and it keeps me getting excited for episode 8, and I like the title. I really hope they don't kill Luke because I feel like that's really lame, but I'm hoping for the best with this one. But I do quite like the title. I think it does sound very much like a 90s Heir to the Empire type of Star Wars book, like the stuff that doesn't count anymore, but it reminds me of the Star Wars books at the time, so I kind of like that about it. In a way, it's probably one of the most Star Wars titles you can have, but I guess they're all Star Wars titles technically. Apparently they're developing another Terminator movie, but this time with James Cameron, and he very much wants Deadpool director Tim Miller to direct it. They haven't actually met yet, though. That's someone who he is interested in. He's interested in getting Tim Miller to direct the new Terminator. That's his idea because the rights for the Terminator revert back to him in 2019, so he wants to make another Terminator franchise, but he's too busy making literally and actually 4 Avatar sequels, shooting 2 and 3 back-to-back and then 4 and 5 back-to-back or something. We'll see if that actually happens, since this story is a little older, if they've actually met with Tim Miller at this point, or they just say like, we're gonna meet with Tim Miller and it looks like it's gonna happen, is very presumptive. I agree with most people. Please leave Terminator alone at this point. And may I remind you that James Cameron really liked Terminator Genesis. He in fact endorsed it and made an ad saying how much he liked it, and you know, he wasn't even paid to do that. Although I think Tim Miller maybe sort of could do one. There's all this speculation on what he's doing next, but he really just got kicked off of Deadpool 2 a couple months ago. It's clear he doesn't know what he's going to do other than like executive produce that Sonic the Hedgehog movie. If I was him, I would make that weird movie he's always wanted to make, because it seems like everybody wants him, and this is just adding hype to the Tim Miller name and adding hype to potentially another Terminator film. But I really hope this doesn't work or doesn't happen, but I also would not like there to be Avatar sequels, and it looks like I'm going to have to deal with 5 movies that I didn't want and probably no one else wanted either. The director of Godzilla 2 has been announced, Michael Dougherty. A lot of people made the assumption that he was going to be directing it because he was writing Godzilla. Apparently Screen Crush predicted it, but a lot of people just assumed, but he is doing it. He did the Krampus and Trick or Treat. I'm hoping Godzilla has kind of more of a holiday theme thing. Maybe Godzilla 2 can take place during Thanksgiving or something. This Godzilla movie is supposed to feature a lot more kaiju, like particularly Mothra and Rodan and maybe others, so I'm excited for this. I think he's kind of a lot more of a funnier director than certainly Gareth Edwards was. He's the kind of director I'd be very interested in making the leap to like big budget filmmaking, and he's the kind of quirky kind of director that you really want doing your big project to make it a little different. The Razzie nominations came out the day before the Oscars, as they also give out the awards the day before the Oscars. Most people don't really like the Razzies, and in fact like most film critics and cinephiles really don't like them because they're not even really that good at picking the worst movies. They usually pick the most high profile worst movies. Like Batman v Superman was on here, and it's like nobody really likes Batman v Superman, but it's like they pick like 50 Shades of Grey and the Twilight movies. Really just a lot of low-hanging fruit, kind of easy targets. The worst picture nominees are Batman v Superman, Dawn of Justice, Dirty Grandpa, Gods of Egypt, Hillary's America, which is Dinesh D'Souza documentary, Independence Day Resurgence, and Zoolander #2. And I will say, Independence Day Resurgence probably deserves to be in there, and 2 of these movies were, I guess, on my worst films of the year list. Also, like, Ben Affleck as worst actor. Most people kind of liked him as Batman. I don't know what their fucking deal is. And they got mad at, like, Megan Fox and Ninja Turtles 2. Like, I mean, she wasn't amazing, but, like, that wasn't... The Razzies continue to be the worst at actually being the worst. And it's a tradition they can seemingly never get out of. Norm of the North wasn't nominated. Like, how can you make a worst movies of the year and not nominate Norm of the North? They're literally bad at being a bad movie award show. Maybe that's a meta thing, or maybe they're just, like, you know, really bad at being the Razzies, which I think is probably the latter. There was almost going to be a G.I. Joe Transformers crossover, but the thing that's holding it back is actually Michael Bay, the director of XXX3, who at this time I believe is going to be directing G.I. Joe 3. He mentioned that they're pretty much just waiting for Michael Bay to leave, and after that they're going to cross over G.I. Joe and Transformers. But since Michael Bay keeps saying he's going to leave and doesn't actually leave, they haven't done it yet. So that's the only thing really holding them back, but it seems like that's something that is going to happen in the future. Now, moving on to box office. Split opened at $40 million, being probably the biggest opening of 2017 thus far, which doesn't mean much as the year's pretty new. And Split, with its $40 million, is now the highest grossing movie of 2017, which again, early days. It is one of the biggest openings of M. Night Shyamalan's career. It's in like his top 5 biggest openings, and a lot of people think it'll be the first film from M. Night Shyamalan to cross $100 million since The Last Airbender. Looks pretty possible. Making $40 million in your opening weekend usually means you're going to make over $100 million. Not always, but usually. We'll see how it does in the coming weeks, but it's doing well so far. XXX also opened second at $20 million, not doing quite as well, and only so far doing just a little better than Riddick did when that opened. So it kind of doesn't look like it's going to be the big second franchise for Vin Diesel that everyone thought it was, but it's doing a little better internationally. And a lot of the Oscar stuff went down this is last weekend, but this weekend is probably going to go up. They're going to open in more theaters, particularly La La Land's going to get a big bump, and Hidden Figures and both Arrival and Hacksaw Ridge are going to be in a ton more theaters, as well as Moonlight and Manchester by the Sea and everything. So you'll see a lot of Oscar movies going up, especially because the next 2 weekends are relatively weak, and I think any money A Dog's Purpose was going to make kind of like fell out the window after that video leaked from TMZ. Up until Lego Batman and 50 Shades Darker or whatever, the more interesting stories are going to be Oscar nominees and less about like the big movie opening that weekend, because really it's a lot of weak stuff until the weekend of February 10th. So it's not going to be the most interesting box office, but hey, February 10th as a moviegoer, that's what I'm waiting for as well, because there's not much, unless you need to catch up, which I need to see Lion and Fences and Hacksaw Ridge, so I'll be like the rest of you in terms of catching up on Best Picture nominees. Rogue One, A Star Wars Story, crossed $1 billion worldwide. It is now the 4th highest grossing film worldwide of 2016, and the 4th film for Disney to make over $1 billion in 2016, which is ridiculous, and is still making money in America. It was number 6 last weekend. Turns out Alien 5 is probably not happening after some tweets from the director of Chappie, who said it's probably not going to happen. Alien 5 is going to be kind of the reboot of the Alien franchise. It's kind of like a reimagining of what happened after Aliens, with Sigourney Weaver and Michael Biehn or whatever and Newt, and kind of instead of, you know, those two dying in Alien 3 happening, an alternate reality type of thing. And they were talking about that, but it looks like Ridley Scott wanting to make Prometheus sequels is something they want instead. I haven't really been into Neil Blomkamp and any of his movies since his first one, District 9, so to me it doesn't really matter, but apparently that's not happening, so there's not actually going to be 2 competing Alien franchises at once. This is kind of a cool movie premise that got sold and will be produced by Michael Bay. It's called Little America, and it's kind of an Escape from New York ripoff type of thing, where America is bankrupt and China asks for all of its debt money back right away, and it bankrupted America, and America is kind of like a huge ghetto slum. The president of China's son is trapped in America, and they send a soldier in to go get his son back. So it sounds like a cool idea. I don't know much about the director, who isn't Michael Bay. Michael Bay's just producing, but I like the concept and it sounds pretty cool to me. I know we all heard about how Dan Harmon did some rewrites on Doctor Strange. Apparently, really all he did is they showed him a cut of the movie. He gave them some advice because they wanted a real sci-fi guy to at least look at it and tell Marvel Studios what he thought, and that's pretty much all he did. He kind of said that on his podcast, Harmontown, several times, that really all he did was eat a pizza at Marvel Studios opposite leave. I mean, no one has really alluded that he did that much. It's just because he was a bigger name. But if you were wondering what he really did, Sing 2 has been announced. It is scheduled to open December 25th, 2020. Secret Life of Pets 2 has been delayed from July 13th, 2018 to now July 3rd, 2019. Oh, and Minions 2 has been pushed up to July 3rd, 2020. So those are the dates on Illumination stuff. So you're going to get a lot of Illumination sequels towards the end of this decade. So when we're finally kind of poking our heads out from the disaster that has been this Donald Trump presidency, there'll be some Illumination sequels to comfort us or just make us hate life all over again. There's going to be a new movie from the director of Green Room, Jeremy Saulnier. It sounds actually really cool. It's actually going to be presented on Netflix. It's about a kid who's been kidnapped by wolves, and a guy has to go off and find this baby child and bring him back, and the father of the child is also hunting the guy who's trying to hunt these wolves, which sounds kind of interesting, very Jeremy Saulnier, and I'm very excited for that. It's called Hold the Dark, and it sounds pretty promising and very Jeremy Saulnier. You should check out his other films, Green Room, which obviously I put on my top 10 at number 2 of the year, and Blue Ruin, which I also really like. There's an interesting article in the AV Club about how we're wrong about the Death Star, that most people think the trench battle scenes in A New Hope are the ring that's around the Death Star that's horizontal. It's actually vertical north to south where that trench is, not the around thing. And apparently a guy who works at ILM noted that most people think that, but it is incorrect. It is the vertical lines in the Death Star, not the horizontal one. The horizontal one is the docking bay, not where they had the trench warfare things, which were vertical. Yes, I never even thought of that because I always thought it was like the middle thing, but he's like, people just assume that, but it's actually not true. I was like, oh yeah, you learned something there. I found this interesting article and I think it's really cool. It's kind of a bit of interesting film history I didn't know about. Apparently there is a lost Martin Scorsese documentary about this weird guy, Stephen Prince. It was called An American Boy, A Profile of Stephen Prince, and apparently a section of that where he describes putting an adrenaline needle in a girl who passed out of a drug overdose was actually referenced in Pulp Fiction. And there's a video in this article that shows both the scene from this lost documentary that Martin Scorsese made and the scene in Pulp Fiction, and holy shit, it definitely does. That's something that of course Tarantino would do, is reference a never been released Martin Scorsese documentary about this guy Stephen Prince, who was like a roadie and a racketeer. He also told the story in Waking Life, and they also have a segment that Richard Linklater directed interviewing this guy Stephen Prince. So it's actually very interesting. I never knew that scene was a reference from a lost Martin Scorsese documentary that I had never heard about until this point. So there is a lost Martin Scorsese film, and it's called American Boy, A Profile of Stephen Prince, which I very much want to see. It was made in the late 70s, but never released. I'm not exactly sure why it was never released, and that's a whole thing I want to get into. But apparently that scene in Pulp Fiction is actually a reference to a story he tells in a 1978 movie that no one has ever seen, but of course Tarantino has. So this week was the Sundance Film Festival, and like most of you, it's interesting to kind of get what the coverage is about from Twitter and things, but you're not really going to want to read a lot of reviews, right? Because they're movies we're probably not going to see for like 6 months, if that. Probably not even going to see, like, I don't know when we're going to see them, to be honest, most of the time. So I don't really get to read much of the coverage. I'm just going to list off some movies that sound interesting to me and I'm excited for. So there's probably some I missed and probably some you heard about, and if you want to talk about those in the comments, let me know. But these are the ones that I heard about that interest me and the very little I know about them. So this should be fun or just stupid. Landline, which is the latest film from Julian Rapasphere, who directed Obvious Child. It's kind of like, to my understanding, like a family drama in the 80s or 90s. I loved Obvious Child a lot, so I'm excited for that. A Ghost Story, which is the new film directed by David Lowery, who also directed Pete's Dragon. I know that Rooney Mara and Casey Affleck are in it, who are also in his previous film, Ain't Nobody Saints. I like Pete's Dragon a lot. It sounds kind of a weird, cool ghost story, and someone's like in a like kind of a ghost sheet thing the whole time, and that's supposed to be weird or something. I'm curious about it. I didn't like his first film that much, so that makes me worried. But it was kind of a film no one knew they made, and then suddenly they made it and played at Sundance, and people really like it. And there's a scene where Rooney Mara eats pie that everyone's really into or something. I don't know. There's a film called The Big Sick, which is about Kumail Nanjiani meeting his wife Emily, and I've heard that story before on various podcasts, and it actually sounds like an interesting story and a good story for rom-com, and I like Kumail Nanjiani a lot, and that sounds like a cool movie. Nobody Speak, which is the story about the Hulk Hogan Gawker lawsuit, which I think sounds really interesting to me. Ingrid Goes West, which is about some sort of a stalking thing with Audrey Plaza and Elizabeth Olsen, which sounds cool to me. And then Casting JonBenet, which talks about the JonBenet Ramsey trial and the effects it had on the town that it happened in. And I think culture, maybe? I don't know. There weren't really a lot of trailers because Oscars just kind of ate up all the movie news this week. But there was a Walter Hill film starring Michelle Rodriguez. Walter Hill, who directed The Warriors and wrote Alien and also directed 48 Hours. But this is about a hitman who kills a crazy doctor's brother, and so the doctor decides to give the hitman sexual reassignment surgery against his will and make him into Michelle Rodriguez, and the doctor is played by Sigourney Weaver. And it sounds like a crazy VOD type of premise movie, and also sort of offensive. I'm very curious about this because I really like Walter Hill, but they never show what Michelle Rodriguez looked like as a man, so the premise of this movie is not very clear in the trailer, which is bizarre. I feel like it sort of is, but like if you just showed what she looks like as a he, but I think they didn't probably want to show you that because it's probably really embarrassing. This film sounds like such a train wreck. I kind of can't wait. All right, so that was movie crap for this week. Thank you very much for watching. Sorry there were 2 movie craps this week. If you didn't like that, I guess we took 2 movie craps. The next video seriously will be a review. I reviewed Silence and The Red Turtle, as well as the Oscar nomination breakdown. I think there was some good videos this week. I hope you enjoyed them, as well as a XXX3 review and a review of Split. So check those out if you haven't already. Thank you very much for watching, and subscribe if you would like to.